instill a government that reflects the image of people. Do not support people because it looks fashionable. There's some things I would never support. Traore, military dictator. I can never, in good conscience, support military dictatorship. Don't support evil because you see social media propaganda. Like I say, I'm not here to be popular. I'm here to speak the truth. If you know the harmful effect of military rule and the suppression of population, and you know how harmful military rule is, it's also part of the mindset. Because the standards are so low now, that's why a lot of people now clamor for military rule. And with just little propaganda, people are swayed. With good propaganda, anybody can sway people, like what they're doing in Burkina Faso. It's what is propaganda. Yes, one or two influencers come to report a certain side of the story. I've been in media for what 20 years. I know how this plays out. Don't be swayed. Rule is always and will forever be a military rule. No matter how much you shape it, a military rule is a military rule. If Traore loves his country so much, he must return the country back to elections immediately and let the people's will be disappeared. That's just it. You might make the argument and say, Africa originally does not have democratic everything, but the will of the people. And democratic governance also has brought lots of change. It depends on leadership. And that's why we must fight against anything that hinders the democratic process and we must constantly call for accountability. It's not perfect, but it's a whole lot better military rule, where somebody pick up the gun, play martial music on the radio, and that's it. You can't build a society, you can't build a continent that way. You can't bask in evil and justify evil with propaganda. Respect, we must be able to ask questions that are key and evidence at times. First thing I've talked about. I will talk about the fiscal bastardization in other recordings and other sermons. But what you're going to hear now, the message by President Lumumba, and it promises to be a good one. Bless you. We'll keep taking your calls to come in on next week. We're still doing our Chinese outreach in prisons, and my friend Dr. Oseni is also doing it right now. God bless you all. Could you play from Lumumba's message and I sent again?
Thank you very much. Let me, for the sake of protocol, start by recognizing the Chancellor of the University of Education. Permit me also to recognize the Vice Chancellor, the representative of the Minister for Education, the representative of UNESCO here present, the student body here at the University of Education, And it's also right to say that I'm a husband of one wife, and she's present here. And to also recognize three young people who work with me here in Ghana and who have traveled all the way from Kumasi. That is Razak and Idrisu, and Anna Nanor, who have traveled all the way to Cape Coast. It gladdens my heart to be present here in Ghana. When I listened to my good friend, Professor Samuel, there was a sense in which he took the thunder from my presentation. And if I was a judge, as is our leadership, I would have said that I have had the advantage of listening to him and that I have nothing useful to add, save to associate myself with his views in toto. But things are being done this afternoon for the sake of protocol. And for the sake of protocol, I'll have something to say. And the thing that I will say speaks to education. You know, today, when we talk about Africa, we talk about her in the manner in which we know her after the colonial project. So we talk about Ghana as if Ghana started existence in 1957. We talk about the 54 recognized countries as if there was no life before they regained their independence. We talk about education as if prior to the coming into the continent of the colonizers, led by the Portuguese, whose handiwork you see at Elmina, prior to the advent of the British, the French, the Dutch, the Italians, and the Germans, and even the Arabs, that we did not exist and there was no education. That is a falsehood. We know that when the Europeans were still living in darkness, here in West Africa, there were organized kingdoms. We know there were universities. We know there was education that did not entail the issuance of certificates as the badge of education. If you ever doubted this, you only have to familiarize yourself with the works of Senegal's Cheikh Anta Diop. Cheikh Anta Diop reminds us that the Greeks learned their mathematics here, that their theories of construction were learned here, that there were great artists here. Africa had a golden age. But we must never make the mistake of romanticizing the past and forgetting that we have now and the future to live for. Indeed, our very presence here under the theme Empowering Minds and Shaping the Continent for the 21st Century is a reminder to us that we have a duty to reclaim our past. And what we are doing here has been done several years before. Students of history will tell you that as early as 1906, that great South African Pixley Kaisaka Seme, then a student at the University of Columbia, gave an iconic speech, The Regeneration of Africa. And he reminded us that we have a duty as Africans to regenerate ourselves. You only regenerate that which had been generated. He was right. Those of you who are Ghanaians will remember that great Ghanaian, James Emmons Kwejiragri, ordinarily referred to as Agri of Africa. And you'll remember him reminding us that although we have, courtesy of colonization, been fed on chicken feed for too long, we are eagles and we can fly and soar. We are here to remind ourselves that the time is now to reimagine and to rethink Africa. We must also remind ourselves that when we talk about Ghana, we must never make the mistake of confining ourselves to the geographical space that is called Ghana. We must remember those iconic words and immortal words of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. On the day when you celebrated the regaining of Ghana's independence, and you said the independence of Ghana means nothing if the rest of Africa is not independent. And he did not just mean the continent of Africa. He meant our kith and kin in the diaspora, to be found in the Caribbean, to be found in the United States of America, to be found in Europe, to be found in Australia. He meant all of them. And today we are here to talk about rethinking of education, because we in Africa have borne the brunt of abuse. That which we had was disrupted. In Mali, which is not too far from here, in the 14th century, long before the American Declaration of Independence, long before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, long before all these declarations that you hear about, there lived a man, Sundiata Keita. And there was a Declaration of Human Rights, the Mandian Charter. You could not write a charter if you had no education. We had education. You are not far from Benin. The walls of Benin, history will tell you, were longer than the great walls of China. The Europeans and Americans are now admitting that they stole our artifacts and they are returning them. We had education here. The Monomotapa Empire in what is now called Zimbabwe. The Akan peoples here, the Ga, the Ewe, the Mandinka, the Bambara, the Mosi, the Baganda, the Ovambo and Ovimbundu in Angola had systems of governance. That is why you say Nananum. There is wisdom in that. So when somebody comes here and tells you that we only started governing ourselves when something called democracy was introduced to us, he is a liar. And we are telling ourselves that we were disrupted. This is why we have this conversation today. The disruption was so great that today, here in Ghana, when you go to Tamale, the Moba people are to be found in Togo and to be found in Ghana. And somebody wants to tell us that the Moba in Ghana are Anglophone and the Moba in Togo are Francophone. It cannot be true. Somebody tells us that the Ovambo and the Ovimbundu in Angola are Lusophone because they were colonized by the Portuguese, and that they are kith and kin in the Democratic Republic of Congo are Francophone because they were colonized by the Belgians. It cannot be true. But the disruption was so thorough that when we regained our independence, or even before, we were told that our names were not good. So that when you are Christianized and you are Pipim and you went for baptism and you renounced the devil with all his works, they also said you have to be John. Because in their scheme of things, it appears that the heavens only recognize John, not Pipim. We were told that all the education we had acquired meant nothing. So that if you are eloquent in Ga or in Chui, you are not intelligent. You are only intelligent in English. You can only be intelligent in French, in Portuguese. We now know that that is nonsense. And you know, when that great Nigerian musician in the 1980s, fella Nicola Pokuti said, "Teacher, don't teach me nonsense." He meant it. He was reminding us that we must examine our education system. You know, when the British came here and they were establishing schools across Africa, and then when they were establishing Achimota, which is famous for producing great Ghanaians, the intention was to produce young men and women who would support the colonial empire. The intention was the same in Uganda with Budo's King's College. It was the same in Kenya with the Alliance schools. As Chinua Achebe says, the white man was clever. He came and put a knife in the things that held us together, and things fall apart. And they have remained apart. So today, when we come here to talk about education, we come here to remind ourselves that we have urgent business to be undertaken. We have urgent business to be undertaken to remind ourselves that Martin Luther King Jr. is still right. The mind is the standard of the man. Because if the mind cannot imagine, then we cannot realize our potential. So we are here to interrogate our education system. My good friend, Samuel Pippin, doing the work that he came to do, to lay the ground, reminded you appropriately that we have now become famous for producing graduates in agriculture, some of whom, if you allow me a little latitude and hyperbole, cannot distinguish between a goat and a sheep. And that is why every person you ask in Africa is a farmer, but we are still importing chicken from Brazil. When I sit at the breakfast table in any African country, what am I served with? Nescafe from Nestle in Switzerland. There is not a single coffee bush in Switzerland. When I sit at the breakfast table, cocoa from Nestle, and yet Ghana is the largest producer of cocoa. What happened? We were disrupted. Pippin was right. When we want to build our roads, we have engineers, most of whom today, if you do not address them as engineers so-and-so, they rise up, ready to beat you up. But yet, when we are building our highway from Accra through to Winneba, through to Cape Coast, through to La Côte d'Ivoire, it is the Chinese that I see. Which calls into question, what type of engineering are we teaching? We are producing doctors, and they are good, some of them. But yet, when those of us who have the ability are sick, unless they do not know, they want to be airlifted to Dubai and to Germany. They have no faith in our medical system. When we are sick during COVID, all Africa is crying to America, oh, give us Moderna, give us Pfizer, to the Russians, give us Sputnik. We are crying. Yet we have universities with professors in medicine. You know, there is a missing link somewhere. Until the day we have the courage to find that missing link, then we are not preparing for the 21st century. Today, as I came here, courtesy of my hosts, I was driven in beautiful cars. Oh, none was made in Ghana. They are either made in Japan or in Germany. Africa does not produce cars. Ali Mazrui is right. We are in the business of consuming that which we do not produce and producing that which we do not consume. We must re-examine our education system. Even in matters as mundane as sports, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. The United States of America offers our young men and women scholarships to study sports. Our universities don't. Football is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But yet, when one of the masters of ceremony was speaking in jest, it is not the anthem of Asante Kotoko that he remembered, but that of Liverpool, we shall not walk alone. So that as we are sitting here, even in the area of sports, which is a whole multi-billion-dollar industry, our young men and women are preoccupied with whether Arsenal beat Real Madrid or Barcelona beat Borussia Dortmund. They do not care whether Hafia Guinea du Conakry beat Asante Kotoko. The Osagiefo was right when he said, we may actually solve the economic problem. We may even solve the political problem. But I dare say that the mental problem which was impacted and makes us feel inferior will take a little longer to solve. This was not only said by the Osagiefo himself in 1963. In 1933, Carter G. Woodson, that African-American educator writing in his book, Miseducation of the Negro, said that we have been so miseducated for so long. Our self-esteem has been undermined for so long. We have been made to use the back door for so long that even when we are told to use the front door, we look for the back door, and if we can't find it, we create our own back door. The level of our miseducation is amazing. We must change it in order to enter into the 21st century. You know, Brother Pippin, when you said that our passport, technological passports to the 21st century and visas to boot are expired, you are right. How can we play football on the games of rugby, on the rules of rugby? How? This is the question that we want to address today. We are talking about agriculture. And we are saying that we are now using technology to feed ourselves by manipulating the elements. The Chinese are seeding the rain so that it may rain. They have no problem with those of us who pray we must. But this misguided belief by Africans that when there is no rain we pray and do nothing about it is completely misguided. The divine instruction was go ye and subdue the world. And subduing the world is by using our minds, by using the knowledge that we have. This is what the universities must ask. If you are a teacher, what kind of a teacher are you? Today, if I stood here and asked young Africans, and there is no shortage of them here, how many African authors do you know? And I asked, which is the last book of Chinua Achebe that you read? Or Kofi Awunor? Or Aikwe Yama? Or Kamara Lai? Or Flora Nwapa? Or Dambisa Moyo? Or more recently, Chimama and Ngozi Adichie? Or Yagiansi? How many have? We have been made to believe that it's only Shakespeare and Charles Dickens that matter. The time is now for us to change our minds. And we can only change our minds if we decolonize our minds. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, that famous Kenyan writer, says, until the day that we decolonize our minds, we are going nowhere. And Ngugi reminds us that we may have decolonized our countries, but there is something called decoloniality, totally liberating ourselves from the mental chains of the colonizers. You know, the Osagiefo, to whom Africans owe an apology, wrote in his great book, Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, and the most dangerous. We are in that stage. That stage when the colonizer still wants us to believe that our literature is inferior, that our science does not exist, that our mathematics does not exist, that we have no medicine to talk about, that we cannot mine beyond Galamsey, that we cannot extract our own oil, that we have no business being in robotics and cryptocurrency, that we must be consigned to the Museum of History alongside the spinning wheel, that we have no business being in the jet age. That is what we are being told. And my fear is that we appear to be believing it. We appear to be believing it because in our institutions of learning, when you look at our curriculum and you look at the curriculum of a number of countries in the Middle Ages, there is no difference. And I want to remind all of us that in the 1960s, when we were regaining our independence, and you read what was happening in different African countries, and I remind you to reread some of the thinkers of the time and the emphasis that they put on education. I was rereading for the umpteenth time the 32 speeches that were delivered by African leaders in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, between the 23rd and 25th days of May 1963. All of them, without exception, said one thing: if we are to give meaning to our independence, then education must be our focus. So said Ethiopia's Haile Selassie. If we want to change the continent of Africa, we must give meaning to education. So said Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere of Tanzania on that day. If we are going to change my little Senegal, we must give education priority. So said Leopold Sédar Senghor of Senegal. Even the complicit Félix Houphouët-Boigny in La Côte d'Ivoire believed so. But the ultimate was, of course, the one and only, the Osagiefo. He was as eloquent as he was passionate. And when he came home, where did he not visit? If he was not at Legon, opening the University of Ghana, he was in Kumasi, creating what is now the Kwame Nkrumah University. And if he was not at Kumasi. He was here creating an institute. He was everywhere. That is why when I heard my good friend talking about free basic education, he knew that ignorance is the enemy of progress. He knew that if there was a ghost that we had to exorcise, it was the ghost of ignorance. He knew that if there was a devil that we had to pray and fast against, it was ignorance. He knew that if there was anything we had to marshal our forces against in order to exorcise the ghost of tribalism in its primordial sense, it was ignorance. He knew. Yet, several years down the line, when you ask your typical academic, when they want to say that the University of Winneba, of education at Winneba is good, they say it is as good as Oxford. Why? Why can't it be just good? They must say that it's as good as Harvard, as MIT. Why must we always have this inadequacy to compare ourselves with others? We must change in order to enter the 21st century with confidence. Your leadership, who is a judge and belongs to our profession, which is one of the most imprisoned professions in Africa. When you see our judges dressing, they still dress like Father Christmas. Whoever told us that justice could only be administered when you dress like Father Christmas, I do not know. And when we are citing, even deciding a matter on land law in Ghana, in Cape Coast, we still want to cite some decision that was made by some English judge in the 13th century, as if we did not have our own land laws. The time has come that we must rethink and re-enter the 21st century with laws that are known to Ghana. Ask the Ga if they do not have laws that if we refine cannot lead us into the 21st century. Ask the Akan people if they do not have such laws. Ask the Fante people if they do not. Ask the Ewe if they do not. They do. We live in a world where we are so mentally captured that those of you in the middle class, your greatest claim to fame is that my daughter can no longer speak Chui and is meant to be a badge of honor. It is a badge of complete colonial conquest. And we cannot enter the 21st century with that mindset. Go to the countries in the Scandinavia, which we can dare compare ourselves with. Go to Denmark, they teach in Danish. Go to Norway, they teach in Norwegian. Go to Sweden, they teach in Swedish. Go to Finland, they teach in Finnish. Go to Korea, they teach in Korean. Go to China, they teach in Chinese. Go to Japan, they teach in Japanese. Then they meet the world. But you and me, here I am waxing eloquent in English. Not in Kiswahili. We must revamp our curriculum. And we must have the courage to do so as I speak to you now. They are teaching Yoruba and Twi at universities outside of this continent. Why? Because language is a multi-million-dollar, multi-billion cedi industry. It is only us who do not know. Those of you who are religiously inclined, we are the only visitors in Jerusalem. So, brothers and sisters, we are here to remind ourselves that there is urgent business to be undertaken. We are here to remind ourselves that we had a good past. We are here to remind ourselves that others came and through slavery they disrupted that past, that they did not stop there, that they came again under colonization, and this time they disrupted us so very thoroughly and took away even the most precious of things, our confidence. That when they came here and imposed an education system, that education system had only one agenda. The agenda was to create men and women, if they were the English who colonized you, who could speak English and be their clerks. If you are colonized by the French, that you could speak French or Portuguese or Italian or Germany. When we regained our independence, we only made cosmetic changes. The time is now to go deep and remove the cosmetics and go to the fundamentals. And I'm suggesting to you that that has been done. You know, those of you who are a little older will remember that 30 years ago, China was not famous for much. They were only famous for Chairman Mao, for the Long March. Today, even the toothpicks in your hotels here in Winneba are from China. Today, you go to the shops, even the inauthentic Kentes are from China. They have franchised, indeed patented Kente. You go home, your television is Chinese or Korean. You are being persuaded to use your phones. I suspect you are either using Samsung or Huawei. What did China do 30 years ago? They made a decision that we are going to change our education system. And they changed their education system. They engaged in agriculture. They engaged in technology. They engaged in medicine. They engaged in everything. And today, China is the second strongest economy in the world, with a GDP of no less than 19 trillion United States dollars. Compare that with little Ghana. Compare that with little Sierra Leone. Compare that with little Kenya, with little all these countries. What they did was to change their minds in order to change their future. And that is why when we are building roads, whether it's in Nairobi, Kenya, or in Accra, Ghana, or in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, or in Senegal, or in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, or Bamako in Mali, or Harare in Zimbabwe, or in Zambia, who do we find? Chinese. Because they changed their minds. The time is now for us to change our minds. The academics who are here must agree with me that we have sinned and fallen short of the expectations of our countries. And that the time is now to say that we should be forgiven. And if our generation committed those mortal sins, you up there must not repeat those mistakes. You must not repeat those mistakes. You must use the examples and the experience so that you do not step on the landmines that we stepped on. That is why Chinua Achebe said, where are the young suckers that will grow when the old banana dies? These are old bananas. You are the young suckers. So rise up. Africa is not expecting you to engage in a perpetual state of lamentation. No, lamentation will not help you. And I want to remind you that when you are here in Ghana, don't compete with Liberia. You will beat Liberia. Don't compete with Benin. Don't compete with Togo. Don't compete with La Côte d'Ivoire. Don't compete with all these little African dwarfs. Compete with giants. And when Ghana wakes up, this Ghana, you know, sometimes when I think about Ghana, I think about Kwame Nkrumah. And you think about his books, Dark Days in Ghana, Letters from Conakry. When the Osagyefo is so close yet so far, his ideas dead, his books banned until Ignatius Kutu Acheampong comes. It is only in the year 2013 that Nkosazana and Lamini Zuma, the then chair of African Commission, writes a letter of apology to Kwame Nkrumah. I urge you to read it. He tells Kwame, you are right. Everybody was wrong when you said we must unite and change our education system in order to compete. That is Nkosazana and Lamini Zuma. Today, the Osagyefo is here telling us, let us change. He said it in 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He said it in 1964 in Cairo, Egypt. He said it in 1965 in Accra, Ghana. And on 6th day of March 1997, on the occasion of the celebration of 40 years of independence of Ghana, Kambarage Nyerere himself also apologized to Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. He said, you are right, we were wrong. Today I'm saying that we cannot remain imprisoned in history and lamentation. That is why it is still true for you Ghanaians. Nkrumah is dead, but Nkrumah never dies. And the reason why he never dies is that his ideas are evergreen. Who among you here is courageous enough to stand up and contradict me when I say what we are saying here was said by Kwame Nkrumah in 1955? Who among you? Who among you here is courageous enough to tell me that Nkrumah did not think about education of a different kind when he was instituting the University at Legon? Who amongst us? That he was right when he established the Kwame Nkrumah University in Kumasi, that he was right when he instituted the institute out of which grew the University of Education at Winneba. Who amongst you can contradict me? So if he was right, he did not have the advantage of the technology that you have. No. There was no WhatsApp, there was no Twitter or X, there was no Instagram, there was only Telegraph. But he was able to marshal the entire black community throughout the world and give meaning to education. What can you and me not do if we mean to do it? So you young men who are present here, don't tell me Nkrumah was old. Nkrumah was just slightly older than you. If you look at his cabinet, some of them were in their 20s. It is not formal education that maketh a man or a woman. The great Indian sage Raja Gopalachari says, education is not merely attending institutions and acquiring certificates. He says, you may have gone to school, but has school gone through you? This is the question. So, ladies and gentlemen, here today, we are here to tell ourselves ad nauseum that the mother continent can change, and she will change. She will change, and when I look at the future and I hold all factors constant, I see an Africa whose young men and women are educated and their education is about innovation and invention. I see such an Africa. I see an Africa whose sons and daughters will be leaders in cryptocurrency. I see that Africa. I see an Africa where all the cars running from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia to Banjul in the Gambia will either be made in Togo, Burkina Faso, or Uganda. I see that Africa. I see an Africa where the Ghanaian doctors who are running hospitals in the United States and in the United Kingdom will have the courage to come back home because there is something called a hospital where they can do their trade. I see such an Africa. I see an Africa where we will have our own satellites that are launched next to Elmina Castle, and they'll go out there in the orbit, and we shall not be depending on Vodafone. I see such an Africa. I see an Africa where we will be able to produce enough rice, enough cocoa, and enough gold, and we will process it here, and that you will be selling it to Nairobi, Kenya, Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and it will not be necessary to look to the outside world. I see such an Africa. I see an Africa where, apart from Kiswahili, one of the languages that will be spoken will be Chui or Ebe or Ga. I see such an Africa. That Africa is possible. It is possible, Honorable Minister for Education, when at your next meeting you think outside of the box, or preferably without reference to the box. I see an Africa where we will give practical meaning to Africa Agenda 2063, not merely as a point of reference, but as a practical reality. I see an Africa where there is Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and the majority of students here at Winneba will be drawn from Togo, from Benin, from Gabon. I see an Africa where our kith and kin in Martinique, in Guadeloupe, and Barbados, Antigua, and Barbuda will be coming here. I see that happen. That is why, when I have such foresight, wisdom not only requires but dictates that I stop. Because going beyond that would be flogging a dead horse. I see an Africa that gives meaning to those words of the Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, written in his book, Africa Must Unite, that Africa needs a new citizen. Are you those citizens that the Osagyefo was talking about? Are you? Do you have values? Do you have passion? Do you have dedication? Do you have love? Do you have imagination? Do you have the spirit of innovation? Do you have the spirit of invention? If that is true, then I have no fear for Africa. So go out there and amaze Africa. God bless you. Wow.